Welcome to the Push Ventures podcast, Push Your Advantage. And as always, thanks a lot for tuning in. Now we're in March 2024. The new year is 2 months and a few days old. And there's one topic everyone is talking about. So even we felt we should be talking about it. That topic is AI. As always, we're providing you with thought snippets on the African technology startup ecosystem. And we felt AI is also very suitable because there's a lot of potential opportunities that can come out of this for the continent in particular. So AI is a very broad topic, and there's a whole lot we could talk about it. And probably you've noticed this yourself unless you live underneath a rock. There's been advancements in natural language processing, enhanced computer vision capabilities, and the development of powerful and efficient deep learning models. But we want to aim and be very brief about this topic. So what we decided to talk a bit about is the cost, value, and application of AI, the training data, the black box it sometimes appears to be, and accountability when it comes to using AI, and the rapid progress and what we feel the African context could look like. Let's discuss cost, value, and application. Probably all of you have read or heard that the cost of training LLMs is pretty steep, and generally even the cost of using AI is something that could hold it back. MIT has done a report on this and focused on job displacement and actually found that there is quite a minimal impact in a lot of jobs in which they focused also on the US workers. And the reason for that being because oftentimes specific AIs would actually be quite expensive to run. Now, there's also the question of value of using AI as a standalone, but as a productivity enhancer, it's already showing its capabilities, definitely. One of the clear drawbacks that has been observed in many AI applications is to consistently create value for the end users, which means that you see a lot of signups, but also a lot of churn, because what happens in the end on a day-to-day basis, the value perceived by the users is not always there. Ask yourself, for example, which AI tools do you truly use on a daily value where you feel you get a lot of them out of it? I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm simply saying that sometimes the value perceived might not be worth the amount of money people pay for such solutions. So picture and video generation is something great AI does. Writing content is also great. And no doubt that AI has already boosted people's productivity. Consultants, for example, can execute tasks easily with a 25% uptick in speed and about at the same quality. You see that with people like myself, for example, who know how to develop software but are not really software developers. But if you're using AI and you're just trying to do something, you can ask AI, hey, how do I actually do this? And you get a nice method thrown back at you, and you can tweak and play and actually get some good work done. So what we definitely are seeing is that the use of existing AI tools can help reduce operating costs and also empower lesser skilled employees to actually be more productive. What AI definitely is great at is comprehending information much better and much faster than human beings. And if you're like me and you like playing chess every once in a while and you play a chess bot, then you've probably noticed this. They can move much faster and with much more accuracy, and they're very difficult to beat if you play a very high-rated bot. Now, if you're thinking about some of the applications in the real world that we can look at and that are probably already being developed and rolled out, is assisting in medical diagnosis, for example. You can imagine like personalized treatment plans and even in the aid of drug discovery, finding new drugs. Further, in finance, we've already had Jamal here on the podcast last year, and he spoke about how he's deploying AI to help in fraud detection. And there's also systems for risk management, even for trading, that are imaginable. Then, of course, in customer service through the use of chatbots and assistants. And transport, we always consider autonomous vehicles, route optimization. There was a huge fanfare done about this a few years back with everyone having self-driving cars. I'm not going to drop any names, but we basically know that all these self-driving cars so far are still not 100% self-driving, and there's always some control that the human being has to do. And in manufacturing, one of the good things that AI can also do is predictive maintenance and quality control. So there is plenty of applications AI can do, and we simply have to see how it develops over time. When we're considering training data and what we deem the AI black box and accountability, let's look at the training data first. Training data is always required for AIs, and oftentimes it's not in the right format, because what humans are great at is what we've done in the last few years, storing a whole bunch of data. Unfortunately, most of the time it's very unstructured, and structuring that requires a whole lot of human work, which also leads to some of the drawbacks at times, because obviously the question is always around what quality of training data do you have that you feed the AI with, which refers to that garbage in, garbage out principle. Just remember the presentation and the rollout of Gemini, which kind of turned into a little bit of a disaster for Google. So the drawbacks clearly are the interpretability and ethical concerns, as well as bias. And the bias, again, is like, AI systems will obviously inherit biases, which are present in the training data. And once again, Gemini made this wonderfully prominent through some of the pictures it generated. Further, the current AIs are producing great output, but they don't allow us to truly understand their reasoning, which is that what I meant with a black box. So when you're thinking about the developers, they were never truly expected to make the reasoning of the AI something which can be traced so much, because for them it was more important to produce AIs that actually can produce a great output. So now that question arises more, and we already have seen people moving more in that direction of finding ways to make that black box a little bit more transparent. From an ethical concerns perspective, you always have to think as well, where is that training data coming from? And we've seen some lawsuits already which have been started because the training data that was used is articles, for example, from newspapers and publications which are on the internet. And those people are now asking, did I ever give you permission to use that data? So just imagine, for example, all the posts that you've done on Facebook and Instagram, and what would you think if Meta would just use all that to create an artificial intelligence just to see how you would potentially behave? Anything in that case could be possible. And that's also where the accountability issue comes in. Like, who's truly responsible for what some of the AIs do? And one of the examples you could think about is if you had an AI doctor that prescribes a medicine and the patient then passes away. What truly happens then? Who's responsible? Who do you hold accountable for such faults? Now, governments around the world are already trying to understand that impact that AI has. The EU is already doing their best to regulate what they probably barely understand. Some others are understanding it or choosing to ignore it. Some are even focused on creating incentives to create local centers of excellence, which is also something wonderful happening. And this could also be an opportunity for African countries to build some considerable expertise, particularly with regards to African solutions. And this is what brings us to our last point that we want to talk about. Thinking about the rapid progress in African context. Because you all know that suddenly, and you must have noticed this, there's no chance that you missed it. Everyone is AI. Everything is AI. Suddenly, everywhere you look, you see AI. And these are the same companies who didn't even have AI before. So whether it's truly an AI or not, I'll leave that up to you to judge. But one thing we can definitely say is that costs have definitely declined in the past, and through rapid progress, it's much more likely that they're going to fall even more, and probably even quicker than that MIT report assumes for now. But we are having to wait and see, I guess, at times. As mentioned as well, those black boxes begin to open up, which once they're opened up and the reasoning becomes more understandable and traceable, could potentially open even more solutions up for AI to be deployed well. Are we going to see LLMs in Africa? Perhaps not, probably because training them is hugely expensive. However, we should never say no, right? Never say never. So it could potentially happen at some point. But what we definitely will be able to do is smaller models, which we can train as with existing data and for specific African opportunities, perhaps. we will probably on the continent find unique ways of using AI. And it's certainly something exciting that you could think about is how AI, for example, could push healthcare and advisory through telemedicine or even disease monitoring to more remote areas. But once again, we would have to consider as well, how do we monitor use and misuse and control of whatever those AI practitioners would then prescribe. In agriculture, there could be potential crop yield improvements and pest control specific to the soil and weather conditions that we have here across the continent. I'm not saying they're everywhere the same. Then we could use access and learning and education opportunities by providing more tailored feedback. For example, just consider the vast amount of languages and the variety of languages across the continent. So if kids grow up with a particular language, perhaps AI will be a good way to deploy here in order to help us to focus on a more personalized learning to people who speak a particular language, which will then help them learn faster and again increase their productivity this way. Another question we would have to ask ourselves is that of the training data problem regarding the raw data in Africa. How good is our data actually? And how do we truly need to train the AIs to use in those regional contexts as well? So these are questions we have to ask, but there is a lot of opportunity as well. Summing up, you can definitely say that AI's impact spans across sectors with tremendous value creation potential. The high costs to currently run AIs is something that could hold it back. However, costs tend to trend lower over time. We've seen this for almost all of the big innovations. And we will have to see whether we're going to hit a roadblock at some point when it comes to increasing performance. And if so, whether we can have cost-efficient deployments. Finding ways to train AIs for Africa could be a very critical component to tailor-made solutions. And this is also something where perhaps that lack of structured data might be an opportunity for Africa, because the advantage to not having too much structured data or even too much data collection is that if we find the ability to actually agree on a consensus for collecting information in a structured